18 here this morning. 2 Kings 18. We just witnessed as of Friday a major event in the life of our country. And some of us have witnessed this several times over the years. And but here again, the changing of the guard for the greatest nation on earth. We've watched it happen before, as I said, and some of the kings have not been as good as other kings. And we find this as history repeats itself. We find this very true in the Old Testament also. I don't know if you've taken the kids through a trip through the kings and studied the kings, but
Here and there.
here and there, yeah. They might be a little young yet. But I'm going to talk about one particular king. I'll reference the king before him, but we're going to focus on one of the good kings of Israel. And again, I don't know if you've taken Tamara through study of the kings, but Hezekiah was a good king. But rare. It was rare. But I'm going to talk about Hezekiah. So let's look at 2 Kings 18:1. But before we do, let's see if I can just snag. Look at chapter 17. Each chapter heading seems to introduce the next king. And they're side by side. It's because the nation has split into the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. There's reference to a king or a new king in the northern kingdom, Israel, and in the southern kingdom, Judah. And so here in chapter 17, in the 12th year of Ahaz, king of Judah, began Hoshea, the son of Elah, to reign in Samaria over Israel 9 years. So there's a reference then to both king of the southern and the northern kingdoms. But they're talking about Ahaz. And he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord, but not as the kings of Israel that were before him. And so Ahaz was the king before Hezekiah. And he was all about child sacrifice, all about, of course, idolatry, and oppression of the true faith. So that under his realm, the Mosaic law was not enforced, was not appreciated. It was, poo-hoo, dismissed. And what that did then, as a result, would be to diminish the annual feasts and the journey to Jerusalem by the males 3 times a year. So all that's out the window. And of course, they were under the control of other nations. And so that's what Israel or Judah had been experiencing. Wicked idolatry. You can imagine the morale was down. You can imagine the spirituality was all but, true spirituality was all but nil. But here comes Hezekiah. So over in chapter 18, now it came to pass in the 3rd year of Hoshea, remember Hoshea, he was the king of the northern tribe, northern kingdom, son of Elah, king of Israel, that Hezekiah, the son of Ahaz, king of Judah, began to reign. So now this is wicked King Ahaz's son, Hezekiah. Ahaz was wicked. We're going to find out a little bit about Hezekiah. So he's coming in right on the heels of his father's reign. 25 years old was he when he began to reign, and he reigned 29 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name also was Abi, the daughter of Zechariah. And he did that which was, I love reading this. It's like I'm in suspense. I'm in suspense until what kind of a king are they going to be? And then I read these verses. It's just wonderful to see this. And he did that which was right in the sight of the Lord, according to all that David, his father, did. And so we find that he was more of a spiritual man, more of a man of faith than was his son Ahaz. He wasn't your ordinary king, and it's mentioned here that he was different. He wasn't your typical politician. He was no ordinary king, no ordinary politician. One thing that was he's remembered for was that he had the courage to repeal and reverse some of the social and political policies that were in place before him. History repeats itself. Okay? Nothing new, Solomon says, under the sun. So think about this. Your nation has been under a process of decay, morals, spiritual values, no doubt family values. If you're sacrificing your children to the various gods in fires, then the family values are out the window. Okay? Everything's turned upside down. And so what stands out to me about Hezekiah is he had to have courage to turn this thing around. Because you've got all this momentum of the whole nation having been swayed to go one direction as a people, and it wasn't a good direction. And so for one man to stand up as Hezekiah and to say, you know what, we're going to put the brakes on this thing. As of right here, today, right now. We're going to change things beginning now. Sound familiar? So, this man, as I said, was a standout. Look at verse 5. He trusted in the Lord God of Israel. No more idolatry. So that after him was none like him among all the kings of Judah, nor any that were before him. So kind of a unique character. But again, what's interesting is his father was a creep. Yes, kids, I said creep. Good. His father was a creep. So he grew up not only in a nation of idolatry, but in a household of idolatry. The father influence. Okay? So what happened? Well, the sons don't always follow the same path as their father. Okay? Don't want to mention any names, but anyway, the sons do not always follow the. Peter, why'd you look up right now?
Peter woke up.
Peter woke up. Yeah. I didn't say anything. Anyway, but that doesn't always happen. But how wonderful it is when someone does say, "Look, enough is enough. We are the people of God." And so one of the things that he restored, repealed, and restored was national identity. He was all about nationalism. Hey people, we're the people of God here. And so what we need to do is stage a revolt against oppression of Assyria. We need to throw off the yoke that they've been putting upon us and the tributes that we've been having to pay, and we need to become a nation again, a solid people once again. And so one of the things that he did was to reestablish, of course, the whole order of the Mosaic system, including Passover. And when they reestablished the Passover and the feasts, he invited, get this, he invited the brethren up north, the Jews up north in the northern kingdom, invited them to come and participate. So he wanted the divided people to come together around the Lord. He wanted to restore the people of God as one. Okay? So that which divided them, he wanted to bring about a healing. That's why I appreciate what I heard the other day. And I know that we're in a different time, and I know that there's prophecy, and I know that much of what was said probably won't happen. For one, Israel was an autonomous nation in so much as they were, yes, they were governed by an outside nation, but they were a singular people. Okay? They weren't a mixture of races. They were the Jewish people. So they had that going for them. And so some of the things that we heard the other day in the inaugural address were wonderful. They sounded great. But I don't know if a lot of it can be accomplished given the times we're in. But what I appreciate about Hezekiah is that he was a man also under the gun of a foreign nation and foreign diplomacy being executed on Israel, and he stood up to reform it. He stood up to repeal it. He stood up to resist it. He was courageous. That's what I appreciate about him. He was a man of God. So he wanted to restore the people. He wanted to restore the Passover feast. He had pride. He had pride of being God's holy people. And so he sought to bring them back, to rally them back to the oneness of Israel. Okay, when I say Israel, I mean, Judah or Israel, okay, because they had been praying to so many other gods, and we're told in the Bible that God is what kind of a God? He's a jealous God. So every time they prayed to Molech or Ashtaroth or Baal, every time they offered a child to one of these gods, it hurt God. He's jealous. And he's probably thinking all the way back to Egypt, look, you people, I brought you out of Egypt. What are you doing? And so Hezekiah stood up to reform all of that. Well, when the rebellion began, some of the neighboring nations, such as Egypt and the others, talked about joining in the coup, because Assyria owned the whole area. And so they talked about, hey, yeah, let's throw in our lot together and let's overthrow these guys. Okay? But when it came right down to it, some of the other nations backed out and left Israel, Judah, holding the bag. But it got Sennacherib's attention enough to start sending troops down there, because he heard about what was going on. So he starts to invade the southern kingdom, and he's knocking off village and town after another, one after another, and showing his force, and got Hezekiah a little scared, a little nervous. So that now the punishment was, for even thinking about doing this, was an increased bounty, an increased tribute. In other words, taxes were raised. And to the point where Hezekiah had to give up even his own possessions in that exchange. So again, they're paying this nation for protection. They're paying this nation's tribute because they're dominated. And so that was what was going on there. But afterwards, some time had passed, then Sennacherib's troops receded and things calmed down a little bit. But Hezekiah knew that these guys aren't going to be satisfied until they actually take us over completely, including Jerusalem. So he knew they'd be back, because they were pesky fellows, Samuel. They were pesky fellows, They would be back, okay? Ruthless and undeterred from their overall goal. So what did he do? He began then a whole reform of the nation. He began to militarize the people, train soldiers, began to fortify all the cities and stock them up with food, and get them to be prepared for when the troops would come in, because he knew this, of course, would do it. And so he began to prepare his own people for the onslaught of invasion. Okay. Then, secondarily, he began to dry up or otherwise affect water resources outside of Jerusalem, so that when the soldiers would come in, there wouldn't be any nearby water resources. Of course, that would affect their troops. And so he was a thinker, this guy. Philip, if you don't start something you can't finish, right? So he was preparing his people to finish this. But the thing about it is, as many things as he did, materially or physically, to prepare, one thing he never forgot was that God was in charge. Okay? And so when things got excited and Sennacherib began to send his troops in as basically a show of display of force and of power, he approached Hezekiah's people and began to taunt them and say, what do you guys think you're doing? You guys are idiots. We've been conquering left and right. We're mowing down all of your towns. We've mowed down all the towns and nations around you. Who do you think you are that you could withstand our troops? And so they were taunting God's covenant people. And so I want us to take a look at how King Hezekiah responded to that. 2 Kings chapter 19. And it came to pass when King Hezekiah heard it, it was reported to him of Sennacherib's troops, what they said, taunting. And it came to pass when King Hezekiah heard it, that he rent his clothes, he tore his clothes, and covered himself with sackcloth, and went into the house of the Lord. That was his response. His first response when he got the bad news that you poked the bear. You stirred up the hornet's nest real bad this time. Okay? And so they got a little taste of it when the troops were there. And so the first thing he did, his first reaction to meet the crisis, was to acknowledge his God. Any king, any leader, in taking this position, has to acknowledge the existence of God and the power of God. I was pleased Friday when I heard there was at least an acknowledgement of God. We haven't heard that in 8 years. The only reference we heard was that the most beautiful sound was the sound of the call for prayer in the morning of the Islamists. That's what he said. That was beautiful to him. Well, for the new king now, to give honor and prominence to the one God is beautiful to us, refreshing to us. So his response was to humble himself, to cover himself with sackcloth, which is a indication of total repentance and humility, and marched himself right down to the house of God. And he sent Eliakim, which was over the household, and Shebna the scribe, and the elders of the priests, covered with sackcloth, to Isaiah the prophet, the son of Amos. And they said unto him, Thus saith Hezekiah, This day is a day of trouble, and of rebuke, and blasphemy, for the children are come to the birth, and there is not strength to bring forth. We're on the brink of war. There's a crisis on our doorstep, and we're not able to carry through with it. Even though all the preparations that he had made, he's realizing that this is perhaps more than he thought. It may be the Lord thy God will hear all the words of Rabshakeh, whom the king of Assyria, his master, hath sent to reproach the living God. It may be that God would consider the insults. It may be that God heard, and he would rebuke, and will reprove the words which the Lord thy God hath heard. Wherefore lift up thy prayer for the remnant that are left. So the servants of King Hezekiah came to Isaiah. And Isaiah said unto them, Thus shall you say to your master, Thus saith the Lord, Be not afraid of the words which thou hast heard, with which the servants of the king of Assyria have blasphemed me. Now, we just read in Sunday school, in the book of Revelation, that in the last days, the kingdom that is raised up is a kingdom of blasphemy. A kingdom of blasphemy. They will be blasphemed. They won't be a non-believing nation or kingdom. They'll be a spiritual kingdom. At its very core will be a belief in a God. They won't be secular. They won't be atheists. They'll be a theistic empire, believing in a God. And while they're believing in their God, they're attacking the credibility and the power of Israel and the Christians' God. That's blasphemy. And so we're told that it's a man speaking horn with a man's mouth, speaking blasphemies and crying out against the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So that's what we see here. He said, God has heard this, with which the servants of the king of Assyria have blasphemed me. Behold, I will send a blast upon him, and he shall hear a rumor, and shall return to his own land, and I will cause him to fall by the sword in his own land. You know what happened to him? When he returned to his land in utter disgrace, utter defeat, why, what happened? Who remembers what happened?
Sons killed him.
His sons killed him.
He was praying at the altar.
Yes, his own sons. Okay? He humiliated his people. He humiliated them. But really, it was God that humiliated the people. But they took it out, of course, on their dad. But what happened was that the army came in, they were camped, and God sent in his death angel, as it were, similar to Egypt, and he went throughout the camp and killed 185,000 troops. They never woke up. Killed them in their sleep. desecrated their military strength. And so, but what I want to point out is that Hezekiah turned the crisis because of the man and the character that he was, a courageous man, to reform an entire nation that was already going strong in one direction, to put the brakes on and lead the whole, to turn the nation around and go back toward Jehovah. Okay, go back the other way. When you got momentum going one way, that means the people are bent on that way. The whole social structure is bent on that way. They've been doing that for a long time. And we know the power of social media. We know the power of the people when they're bent on something, bent in one way. My, how their voices are heard all throughout society. For someone to stand up courageously and go against that tide and that movement, taking a chance on their own safety, for sure, but then trying to turn a whole nation around. I applaud someone like that, I really do. And so, and then especially, as in Hezekiah's case, when they don't take the credit, they give all the honor to God, because they know where the source of strength really lies. And so he went and he prayed, and he asked the Lord to deliver. Let's keep reading. So Rabshakeh returned and found the king of Assyria warring against Libnah, for he had heard that he was departed from Lachish. And when he had heard say of Tirhakah, king of Ethiopia, behold, he has come out to fight against thee, he sent messengers again to Hezekiah, saying, Thus shall you speak to Hezekiah, king of Judah, saying, Let not thy God in whom thou trustest deceive thee, saying, Jerusalem shall not be delivered into the hand of the king of Assyria. Interesting, because he's accusing Israel's God of being a deceiver. There's part of his blasphemy. Don't let your God deceive you. He's saying that God is lying to them. That's blasphemy. What's interesting is that the Quran boasts that Allah is a God of deception. In his own admission, Allah is a deceiver, is a deceptive God. So, these people, cut out of the same cloth as the people we see today over there, who are the descendants, essentially, are accusing the honorable God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob as being dishonorable, like their many gods were. And so he says, Thus shalt speak to Hezekiah, king of Judah, saying, Let not thy God in whom thou trustest deceive thee, saying, Jerusalem shall not be delivered into the hand of the king of Assyria. Behold, thou hast heard what the kings of Assyria have done to all lands by destroying them utterly. And thou shalt be delivered. Excuse me. And then the question, logic. Pointing them to past military campaigns and their successes. He says, basically saying, look, I want you to think along with me here. You're trusting in Jehovah, right? You're trusting in Yahweh. Consider this. Have the gods of the nations delivered them, which my fathers have destroyed? As Gozan and Haran and Rezeph and the children of Eden, which were in Thalasar? Where is the king of Hamath, and the king of Arpad, and the king of the city of Sepharvaim, and Hena, and Eva? Where are those people? Where are those kings? We mowed those people down. So he's building his case. And Hezekiah received the letter of the hand of messengers and read it. And Hezekiah went up into the house. There he goes again. Yeah. You see, if God is worth going to once, then he's worth going to time after time after time. And once we understand that there really is power behind this, it's not just something that sounds nice. Oh, that's good for you. I'm glad you do that. When we realize that there is a real power to tap into, then it's not just worth going to once or twice, but each and every time, because we cannot dilute the power of God. We cannot. So each crisis, we're taking a piece of God's power away from him. So that by the 53rd crisis, God's just about tapped out. No, God's always, he's the same, right? Today, tomorrow, yesterday, and tomorrow. So we're never going to exhaust God's power. And so here he goes again, because that's who he is in the core, at the core. That's who the man is. And so he says, and Hezekiah received the letter at the hands of the messengers and read it. And Hezekiah went up to the house of the Lord and spread it before the Lord. So he took the letter and spread it out for God to see. And Hezekiah prayed before the Lord and said, O Lord, God of Israel. See, he's invoking the God of covenant. It's a subtle reminder to God that God made an oath to protect his people. Okay, very subtle, but he understands the dynamics between God and his people. O Lord God of Israel, which dwellest between the cherubims, that would be the Ark of the Covenant, that would be the mercy seat. Thou art the God, even thou alone, of all the kingdoms of the earth. Thou hast made heaven and earth. So not only has he made promises to God's people specifically, but he oversees all the kingdoms, including Assyria. He's the God of all the earth. In fact, he created the heavens and the earth, so that by that very act puts him in the top position of all peoples, all nations. So he's, first of all, recognizing the supremacy of God. How did Jesus teach us to pray? Our Father, who art in heaven, in the heavens, above everything else, holy is your name. It's the same thing. Holy is your character. Honorable are you. Okay? And so, Lord, bow down thine ear and hear. Open, Lord, thine eyes and see, and hear the words of Sennacherib, which hath sent him to reproach the living God. Of a truth, Lord, now in his prayer, he's saying, it is true. You cannot deny facts. Of a truth, Lord, it is true. It has the ring of truth of what he was saying in the letter. The kings of Assyria have destroyed the nations and their lands. Can't argue that. Can't argue that we go through trials. Can't argue that our lives are troublesome at times. And we go through crises and trials and problems. Can't argue that. We've got a history of it, right? But he's coupling that with the ever-existing power of God to bring him through it. You see? That's the magic of it. That's what he's doing, because he's the man of God. He says, and have cast their gods, these other nations, have cast their gods into the fire, for they were no gods. They weren't even gods to begin, but the work of men's hands, wood and stone. Therefore, they have destroyed them. Now, therefore, O Lord our God. See the distinctiveness there? I beseech thee, I beg you, save thou us out of his hand, that all the kingdoms of the earth may know that thou art the Lord God, even thou only. And so he wants the Lord to shine over all the kingdoms and to be recognized and honored by all the entire world. So it says, Lord, by saving us, you established a worldwide witness of your greatness. That's exactly what Jesus is coming to do. Amen? All the world will see. I mean, we've got satellites, we've got computers, it's all in place. It's all ready. Every eye will see. And when they're all gathered to Armageddon over there, the armies, and they're about ready to rout Israel, God, through Jesus Christ, shows up. Yeshua, the Messiah. And does exactly what Hezekiah recognizes, that all the world will see that there is only one true God, and it's not Allah. It is Yahweh and his son Yeshua. And so keep in mind that under Islam, Allah has no son. That's so repulsive to them that God would have a son. That's ridiculous. The Bible tells us that those who make that claim are Antichrist. They have the spirit of Antichrist. That said God doesn't have a son. He does have a son. He sent his son into the world to save the world because he loved the world. It was through the son, the material son, the physical son, that God could communicate and connect to mankind, which was physical. But they were repulsed at that very thought. They believe in Jesus, yes, but not that he was the Son of God. That's repulsive. So what must God do? God must show them that there's one true God and that Jesus is the Son. And he's going to show them in a big way, called Armageddon, and the return of Christ. Then Isaiah, the son of Amos, sent to Hezekiah, saying, Thus saith the Lord God of Israel, that which thou hast prayed to me against Sennacherib, king of Assyria, I have heard. This is the word that the Lord has spoken concerning him. The virgin, the daughter of Zion, hath despised thee, and laughed thee to scorn. You go back and tell him that the daughter of Zion, and Zion represents the power and the government of God, the daughter of Zion is laughing herself silly against you. Who do you think you are, rebuking God and his people? And so this is the response. Hath despised thee and laughed thee to scorn. The daughter of Jerusalem hath shaken her head at thee. You know, we do that, don't we? Someone does something or says something just like totally weird, and we just shake our heads. Such a lame, we just go, right? Can't believe it. Shake our head. No way, no way. Okay? That's what she said. She's resisting you and all of your threats. Whom hast thou reproached? Now he's getting into this. Okay? This is the wrong move. Whom hast thou reproached and blasphemed? And against whom hast thou exalted thy voice and lifted up thine eyes on high? Even against the Holy One of Israel. You picked the wrong God to fight with. Yeah, the other gods, yeah, you mowed them over. The other nations, you mowed them over. Why? Because those gods didn't exist. They're just in the people's minds. But when you turned your attention to the true people, the holy people, and their one and true God, my friend, I'm afraid you bit off more than you could chew because you just stirred him up. And so that's what he says, even against the Holy One of Israel. By thy messengers thou hast reproached the Lord, and hast said, with the multitude of my chariots I am come up to the height of the mountains, to the sides of Lebanon, and will cut down the tall cedar trees thereof, and the choice fir trees thereof. And I will enter into the lodgings of his borders, and into the forest of his Carmel. I have digged and drunk strange waters, and with the sole of my feet have I dried up all the rivers besieged places. Hast thou not heard long ago how I have done it, and of ancient times that I have formed it? Now have I brought it to pass that thou shouldest be to lay waste fenced cities into ruinous heaps. Therefore their inhabitants were of small power, and they were dismayed and confounded. They were as the grass of the field, and as the green herb, as the grass on the housetops, and as corn blasted before it be grown up. But I know thy abode, and thy going out, and thy coming in, and thy rage against me. Because thy rage against me, and thy tumult has come up into mine ears, therefore I will put my hook in thy nose, and my bridle in thy lips, and I will turn thee back by the way which thou camest. And this shall be a sign unto thee. You shall eat this year such things as grow of themselves, and in the second year that which springeth the same. In the third year sow you and reap and plant vineyards and eat the fruits thereof. And the remnant that is escaped of the house of Judah shall yet again take root downward and bear fruit upward. These are promises of a continuing people. So no matter what happens in between, the many wars, the many conquests by other nations, when it's all said and done, we say at the end of the day, Israel is going to send its roots down again and grow up and flourish. And that will be especially in the kingdom. Amen? They'll be there no matter what. So these vain threats, empty threats, are nothing to God. He laughs. He laughed them to scorn. In fact, the Proverbs say that one day God is going to laugh at these foolish people. God has a sense of humor. When he sees them trying to come up against him, he's just going to laugh. He's going to scorn back at them because they were so ridiculously foolish as to deny or disown God and deny his power. God oversees our lives. That we know. And all we're asked to do is to trust him each and every day, through each and every moment, trial, good or bad, every day, as we learn to lean on him, as Hezekiah did, each and every time. Amen? So 2017, it's a new year. It's a new regime with the promises of a king that believes God and wants to make this nation great again, as Hezekiah wanted to make Judah great again, with God in control. Shall we stand this morning?